Throne Liberty orb changes are finally here. The maintenance was recent and the orb has officially been nerfed. But what does nerf mean for the Expo orb or for other orb players? Should you be swapping or should you stay with the orb? Now let's just jump into it. I'm going to be explaining how big of a nerf it is and if it's actually worth swapping or not. Alrighty, we are here on my Hyperboost character, Expo orb. Now, what I want to say to you guys is before the orb nerf even came, what I did is I went to my hyper boost character because I do have an expo orb there. Now keep in mind this is not even fully geared like a normal legacy character, but it has some alright gear. And I was thinking about doing a dummy test. I did a dummy test without any buffs or anything, and to see how fast I actually defeat the dummy. And every time I did it, it was around every minute I did more or less 5.5 mil damage to close to 6 mil with a 1 minute duration. And I was like, I'm just gonna log off of this character, I'm gonna do this and I'm not gonna change anything with it. I'm gonna log in after the maintenance and I'm gonna check the changes and how much damage difference it will be with the nerf. For the people that don't know, the biggest thing that have been nerfed with the orb, there's a lot of other things too, which I covered in my video, but it's mainly your stellar dash damage, the stellar dash damage and the stellar dash orb effect damage. Those are the things that have been actually nerfed when it comes to the orb, and it is the main source of the orb damage. Now, when I did this, I logged in later and I was like, okay, I'm going to test it out and see how much damage do I do now after the changes. And the result, it wasn't too massive, but I did around 4.5 million, sometimes 4, sometimes close to 5. I never hit the 5.5 again like I did before, but I got close to 5 or whatever. It depends on like how off my rotation was, but the nerf was basically around 20% to 30%. Now I did call out that the nerf is going to be around 30% for the orb in my video, through my calculations, and it seems like I was very close to it, or at least somewhere around that. So your damage that has been nerfed is your stellar dash damage. They have buffed like your void slash damage and stuff, so you can kind of do some extra damage addition to it when you avoid slashing. But your overall stellar dash damage has definitely been nerfed. So the Expo Orb overall is nerfed by around 20%. They have also nerfed other things such as like the mastery and stuff, which I already talked about before. Inside the weapon mastery, they nerfed the veil effect to 25% instead of 35, and the stellar echo to 9. So when you're in a massive fight or whatever, the orb is slightly nerfed. Now, does this mean that the orb is useless? No, I would still say that the orb, Expo Orb, is probably top 2 PvE DPSs currently in the game, and they're just still going strong. I just did a raid. We did Nightmare Raid with a really good team that has a lot of Expo Orbs, and you can see when you play with Expo Orbs, even if it's Dimensional Trials or raids or whatever, it is still going very strong. It is, of course, not as strong as it used to be, but it's still top tier with the other classes. So what does this mean for any other classes? Now, you have to guys keep in mind is the changes just came, right? So people are going to try to figure out different specs. Maybe with the Greatsword did get a pretty nice buff with the Guillotine. It's nothing too crazy, but it's a really nice buff. So you kind of want to be taking some Gladiators with you or Ravagers with you. They can deal some decent damage. So people are still trying to figure out the new specs. The bow got buffed in PvE, the Greatsword got buffed in PvP. So people are still figuring out if they can be strong enough. And what I do think is right now, Expo Orb is still going to be on top for a while. It's definitely going to get hit by another nerf for what I'm seeing, because people are still running it for most of the content, but I do see other classes getting a slight buff. And eventually, I think classes like Invocator or Fury even can compete with it in PvE. Liberator looks to be much stronger with the Deadly Marker buff, and the bow buff looks to be really good for it. So for the people asking about generally about the Expo Orb, yes, you can still play it. It is still viable and it's still needed. If you guys are trying to do trials or dungeons or stuff, just stacking orbs is really OP, because the stacking effect of the orb when you're playing with other orb players, that's why a lot of people are looking for orb players. I think that's why orb is so strong, is when you stack them together, we actually buff each other as orb players with our star calling, but also with the satellite, and that's why it becomes so strong. So I do think the next nerf might be about how the different Expo Orb players synergize with each other, and that way, if they do nerf that, I think that would be like the biggest nerf for it. But currently, I would say the nerf is about 20-30%. depending on your gear. And if you're playing a spec which is not really optimized, and your gear is optimized for the rotation with enough buff duration, etc., I don't think you'll be doing that good damage anymore. So you need to have the proper spec, the proper rotations, this proper gear if you're gonna do good with the Expo Orb. But again, it is still doing good. The bad thing about this is the staff orb nerf. Because the orb got nerfed, the Enigma spec seems to also have taken a hit on it, and it's not as strong as Expo Orb, so that is not too good either. But Enigma still seems to be viable in PvE. For PvP itself, definitely you're definitely gonna feel it more in PvP than PvE if you've been doing a lot of backgrounds and stuff. You would definitely feel the nerf a little bit more because again, the fully nerf is mainly to your stellar dash damage, which is basically your main damage if you're trying to kill anything in the game, while they're buffing other things. So to answer your question short and sweet, it is getting a buff. Now, how do I feel about this? I am playing Expo Orb, and I do think it is pretty OP because I have seen like the buff and changes to my Gladiator, and I tested it out, and even though it feels like a small buff, it doesn't even feel close to as strong as Expo Orb is currently. While spamming the guillotine, getting a cooldown on it, so it's like 6 seconds, or I can use it 6 or 7 seconds, feels pretty nice. It still can't compare damage wise. So it is a huge difference, and if you gear it high enough, you will see like it is a pretty big difference. But I do think eventually the way might not be completely going for nerfs on the Expo Orb, but probably buffing other classes. Like I think the best direction, like they're doing right now, with the PvE damage increase on certain skills, is a good way to balance classes more in PvE. Maybe give a lift to the classes that are struggling, melees, for example, bows, for example, staff, maybe, not too much. But yeah, Orb is definitely going to be dominating. And I said this before, and I told you guys, should probably meta chase in this game. I have been around Throne Liberty for a very, very long time. I played probably over a year, and every time when I played Throne Liberty, I was like, I'm not going to swap meta. Eventually, they're going to nerf it, right? It's too OP. Eventually, going to buff it, right? But the reality is, when it comes to Throne Liberty, is when they usually nerf, they nerf by very little. And when they nerf the Orb, they're not going to nerf it again, at least for a few weeks. They're going to be like, no, we need time to collect data, blah, blah, blah. And then they're not going to nerf it. So it's still going to be strong for a few weeks. So in my opinion, if you haven't swapped, just swap. You can always swap back. I made a video on swapping, but in short, it's very easy to swap in this game. You can go to weapon mastery. You can swap your weapon mastery to, let's say you don't want to play sword, you want to get the crossbow. Boom, you can swap your weapon mastery to that. You can swap all the skill levels by doing the skill swaps right here for skill conversion books, which you should have a bunch of. So everything is fairly easily swappable when it comes to your gear. You can just use the sync system to sync new gear. Let's say I want a new weapon. Let's say I want to switch to crossbow or whatever. You can just use the sync system to swap gear. So swapping gear and weapons is pretty not that crazy in the game. It's pretty simple. So my opinion is, guys, just meta chase at this point, right? If you guys are expecting a massive Expo Orb nerf, it's probably not coming. And when it comes, it's probably going to be too late for you guys anyways. Like, we're probably going to get a new weapon soon, which is going to be the Gauntlet. And then everybody's going to be swapping to the Gauntlet. But this is basically how Throne Liberty works. The Gauntlet is going to be extremely strong. They're going to do a little bit of nerf. Everybody will freak out. Be like, oh my god, it's nerf. Don't play it. But Expo Orb's still good, and the Gauntlet will still be good. So just meta chase. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think. Are you guys happy with this? Or are you like, yo, please let us play other classes? Because it is unfortunate because there's not a lot of variation right now when it comes to classes or stuff you take for PvE. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Check out the video right here, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.